Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com program, brought to you by Techstrong and Plutora. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting program ahead. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we'd like you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab. You can find the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen, along with a few other options. You'll see first, there's also the chat tab, and I'd like you to go ahead and start warming that up for me now. Let us know where you're joining us, or maybe what role you play in your org. We will have a couple of polls launched throughout today's program, and they'll remain open throughout the webinar. So if you don't get a chance to answer that first, you can answer them at any point in time after they're launched. You can find a copy of the slides available for download under the Handouts tab, as well as a link for a free trial. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So the title of our program today is Deliver Value Fast, Reduce Risk with Quality Initiatives You Can Deploy Now. And I'm joined by Marc Hornbeek, CEO of Engineering DevOps Consulting, and Bob Davis, CMO at Plutora. Bob and Marc, thank you both so much for joining me. Bob, you want to get us kicked off?
You bet, Cody. Thank you very much for the introduction, and welcome everyone to the webinar today. As is typical, I'd like to start by thanking you, Marc, for your time on this webinar and for the time for your knowledge on this subject. And everyone, this is Marc Hornbeek's sweet spot. This is, a very passionate area, and we have a lot to talk about. So this is a fun topic for us. So stay tuned. We have a couple offers. We have an ebook. We're going to be talking about a free trial. We've got some great advice from a subject matter expert that I've learned a whole lot from in my years. So here at Plutora. So Marc, let's kick this off and start to talk about what we're going to people are going to get out of this webinar. And I think one of the key things is, everybody's trying to go fast. And the first part of the title is, deliver value fast. And in a world where there's a downturn, where the economic environment, which our businesses are operating in, is challenging, coming off a few tough years. I saw another big layoff announced today or covered today from Microsoft. So there's a lot of pressure. And within that pressure to reduce cost and to show value, there's a pressure to get better and compete and deliver value to customers. And that creates a lot of tension, things that are working counterproductive to each other. So we're going to talk about that and drill in on one of the first, which is, the notion of, if I want to deliver fast, how do I do that without creating more risk? So speed equals errors. If I do things fast, I make mistakes. If I do things, if I take time to do testing, it requires more time. So I've got to balance that speed risk trade-off, and that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what this notion of continuous testing, which Marc champions, and how that can be important to accelerating your release. Essentially, enabling quality initiatives can do both, speed you up and reduce your risk, if you do it right. So that's the key of incorporating continuous testing into your value stream, into your software delivery pipeline. So if we establish that, then how do I do that? What do I need to do to be able to implement that? And I want to implement it quickly. I want to be able to show value to the business fast, at the same time that I'm on a path towards an increasingly efficient software delivery program in my company, or factory, if you will. And how do I do that, so I can get to where I want to go, continuous improvement being the name of the game, but also show that value. So if we can get through all that, I think there'll be some good clues and some good next steps for people to start to drive for that, kind of success. Speed up your delivery of value or user stories or releases to your customers to production, while reducing the amount of risk that you're incorporating into the business as measured by defects. So Marc, with that introduction, let's dive in a little bit. First, maybe just a level set, if you will, no pun intended, on that speed risk balance. Mark, what do you see in your travels with respect to this?
Hey, again, thanks for having me on this webinar. I appreciate it. And certainly this is pretty much my favorite topic, continuous testing.
Yeah, exactly.
But I pretty much echo what you just said, that everybody really wants, faster deliveries, but they don't want to do that at the expense of risk or have problems with quality, security, and various things. And especially now when everybody's trying to watch their budgets, but, do you invest in testing? Do you invest in new features? Or, how do you keep that balance where you really need to make sure that you're not just delivering bad quality or new security concerns because of speed? So it's often not intuitive, and maybe a little counterintuitive, that actually investing in continuous testing actually can give you faster deployments and give you back time, essentially, to work on new features that can be delivered faster and yet not have all those increased risks. So the time to plan, test features, detect and fix problems are less. There's less time if you speed up the whole continuous delivery pipeline. And if you don't, keep a balance of your quality and security processes, then risks are going to escalate, and that could result in failed deployments and growing technical debts. But DevOps really, is the answer to that kind of problem when it's engineered well, keeping speed and risk in balance. And continuous testing is the pillar of DevOps practices that provides the necessary balance primarily. I often say, culture is kind of the door to DevOps success, but continuous testing is the primary key to get in that door and do it well.
So if continuous testing is the key to balancing that, how would you as a consultant talking to customers or talking to folks in the industry, how would you characterize the maturity of the organizations you work with relative to their effective use of continuous testing in this manner?
Well, you're right. I work with a lot of different firms as a consultant and other ways, but I'm actually surprised. I've been in this test automation and fairly sophisticated test methodologies as well for pretty much most of my career, even before 47 years. And many enterprises still don't really completely get it, the relationship. They don't see testing as adding value. So when they do add, they don't really understand the nuances of testing very much. So despite the fact this is in some ways an age-old problem, it's a current problem in many enterprises, and certainly many of the value
my very first job was as a test engineer, and I always felt like I was, my office was in the basement, by the boiler room, and it was a necessary evil. I think that general sense remains, if I hear you correctly.
Okay, yeah, it's not surprising to see, large enterprises only less than 10 or 15% automated testing. And
so it'll be counterintuitive to say if you invest in that, you're actually going to speed up. And that's the thing that I think is kind of the wow moment, at least for me. So let's do a little survey before we get too far into this discussion, Mark, and to get a sense. We want to understand, where you are on your effectiveness, your maturity, the way your organization views this trade-off between speed and risk. The notion of, is testing a necessary evil and it's just fast. So we don't really know, or we're prioritizing quality over speed, or maybe we're prioritizing speed over quality. And the lucky few may have implemented a continuous testing that ensures that quality is not. So it's kind of like, are you already on board with continuous testing and really driving your organization that way, or are you not sure where to go, or are you optimizing for one or the other? That's kind of the question that I have for the audience. So as we generate the the data here is folks fill that out. Mark, what would you expect? I mean, you kind of started to answer the question before, but what would you expect us to see here?
Well, it's going to depend on who's answering the question, of course. I mean, if you're an executive, I think the correct answer is probably not sure, don't know, because many of them don't seem to be in touch with it. A lot of executives say, well, testing is an engineering problem. That's not something I should have to pay attention to. So, but their typical answer, however, is, yeah, we have it in place already, and they find out they don't. But I think in reality, many organizations prioritize speed over quality, and then use that pipeline to deliver. Yeah, there you go.
Look at that, Mark. You're how prophetic. So speed over quality, that makes sense, because the cries you hear from the market are going to be, as long as I've been in product management, product marketing, and working as at the leadership level, that's the cry. We need to get this out faster. When's that fix? When's that release? When's that new upgrade? When's that going to happen? It's yes, we want it to be high quality, but high quality late, lower quality fast. When you say it that way, neither of them sound particularly appealing. So this is good. So in general, folks are tending to optimize one or the other, and only slightly less than a quarter of this audience have figured out that there might be a better way to ensure both. So this is good. So if any of those that filled out that last bullet have some insight as we continue to talk on helping folks understand their experiences, it'd be great to see that in the Q&A. Feel free to pipe in on that. But okay, we can move forward now. We'll continue with that knowledge. So let's chat a little bit more about this conundrum here, Mark. What's the industry telling us?
Yeah, so there's some good insights from different, annual reports that are produced by different research organizations. The State of DevOps, the State of Quality reports are two good ones that do provide, industry insights, and generally they do support the fact that continuous testing is really pivotal to accomplishing that balance of risk versus speed. It's so one of them. These are literally quotes out of it. Continuous testing is a strong predictor of successful continuous delivery, and the elite performers, DevOps performers who are meeting their reliability targets 3.7 times more likely, and they're more likely to leverage continuous testing. So that's a strong indicator of the relationship between continuous testing and delivery performance. They also stated, by incorporating early and frequent testing throughout the delivery process, testers working alongside developers throughout teams can iterate and make changes to their product, service, or applications more quickly, and use that feedback to deliver value to customers. In general, I would say, teams with a mature process are typically getting more benefits from test automation. And overall, the message from this is pretty clear. Get the processes right, engineer them well, and have a clear expectation of what the requirements are. Make sure the team is behind the strategy for continuous testing, and make sure they're trained as well. And then you're going to see, that you can achieve these benefits and maintain the balance. Approach continuous testing strategically and as an engineering approach. There's lots of books out there that talk about testing as an art, but I would argue that it's really an engineering, practice if it's done properly.
Well, you made a comment just a minute ago about testers and developers working hand in hand. That, of course, has a key tenet of this, I think, that we'll be teasing out more as we go through the remainder of the webinar, and that is moving that test activity way earlier in the process. And people have been talking about shifting left for a while, but I think it's when all is said and done, more is said than done when it comes to that. So I think that that is absolutely a key point. If I understand you correctly, would that be fair to say, Mark?
Oh yeah. Shifting left is certainly part of the principles, but it's not sufficient by itself, and we'll talk about that.
Well, and then here's kind of, the ta-da of this opening session, where you say, okay, well, with all that said, testing really is the major bottleneck in terms of delivering fast.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, testing is kind of everywhere across every value stream. Every stage in every value stream has some amount of testing associated with it. It's not just something you do at one major stage in the in a pipeline or a SDLC. And this chart shows that, right? There's and the 50% number, by the way, comes up again and again and again. It's 40 to 60% is what I see in practice that are testing activities across the value stream. If you really start counting it in detail and counting all the different aspects of testing, not just execution of test cases, but all the things like planning, management, automation, tools, test environments, getting the results, analyzing the results, retesting. All of these things happen at every step in one form or another. And then there are many kinds of tests. So, you can see why it's a key bottleneck and why, even though it's a so-called non-value added activity, it's an essential activity that can certainly bottleneck your delivery stream if you're not doing it well, if you haven't engineered it to be fast, efficient, accurate, and high resolution and reliable and sustainable. Too many people jump into the into the game of test automation without thinking about how they're going to sustain the test cases they build or the environment that they build or how they're going to tie everything together. So given the breadth and depth of these dimensions, it's essential to start with a solution that can ultimately address all of them, meaning you really need to have a strong platform. Unfortunately, I see many cases where somebody has their favorite kind of test and test tool, they'll go all in on that. So they'll implement some automation around one thing, and then only later to find out that they've boxed themselves into a corner because that's not the big picture of testing. Testing is across the whole value stream, despite this idea of shifting left.
That always seems to be a bit of an epiphany. Somebody did mention, they caught your comment about testing being non-value added, and I think maybe you could just a couple comments on why you say that, or is that how generally people view it, or what would you say to that?
Yeah, well, testing doesn't add value to the product. It's an essential component, right? Essential process. If you could, you would get the test results without any effort, right?
Right.
But you have to get the results, and unfortunately, that does require effort and so on. So I'm not saying it's bad. It's just in the sense of adding value to the product per se, it doesn't add value, but it's necessary. So the best you can do is to be as efficient and effective at testing as possible, and try to reduce that non-value added, effort and time and expense.
Well, beyond the clear downside of having bugs and issues flowing into customers' hands and reducing their satisfaction with the product, it also, as you look at development, it increases the amount of time the developers are spent doing things that are not creating innovation. So fixing bugs and that sort of thing, that had that been done well the first time, the amount of effort they're putting into actually creating more value and innovating goes up significantly, which is of course the goal. So it's counterintuitive as far as what testing could do to increase innovation, increase the speed by adding more tests. I think that's where it gets really hard for people to wrap their head around it, because what do I do? Do I bring more people in? This is fascinating. The anti-pattern, increasing QA staff. Tell us what you mean here, Mark.
Yeah, so this is a pattern I've seen repeat itself many times. It usually starts with, oh gosh, we have too many problems in production releases. We need to, beef up our testing. And so they get a budget and they start hiring more QA people. And often, again, too often the testing is manual. So you get kind of a negative cycle going on where you've got more QA people and they're generating lots of bugs, which developers now have to deal with. And yet there's no automated way for them to validate their fixes. So it goes through the cycle. It's actually dragging the organization down. Things are taking longer. And ultimately, you're either going to slow down the delivery cycle to accommodate this additional testing, or you're going to deal with more bugs. So it's kind of totally going in the wrong direction, frankly. Whereas the right side of the diagram shows you what happens if you take that same budget and invest it in automated, an orchestration and automation systems and try to really get things under, faster, and that'll generate more coverage. The developers can use the same tooling and testing to validate their fixes, and ultimately that you get into a positive reinforcement cycle, and you do indeed get faster lead times, more features because of that, and reducing risk. So it's what you do with this extra budget when you need to focus on quality that's important.
Right, and I think the other part of that is that in today's environment, there may not be a lot of extra budget. So the knee-jerk reaction might be, we need to add more QA staff, but we don't have budget. So there's a real head-scratching moment there. And so not only is this a smarter way to go, it might be the way you need to go because you don't have the luxury of adding more people. So what do? You start to get into test automation. And as we look at this slide, there is a question about how this automation decreases developer-induced bugs. So as you describe this, you might keep that thought in mind.
Yeah, this is actually a good report. It just shows, that automation indeed does, generate positive feedback, but other benefits at the same time. You get faster release cycles, while simultaneously reducing costs and improving quality. So it's not one at the expense of the other with properly engineered. And that's a key point by itself. You do get all of these benefits, and it becomes a positive reinforcement cycle. It does require investment in automation and continuous testing, which is more than just automation actually, but definitely that.
So is the notion of decreasing developer-induced bugs less about decreasing errors in coding and more about finding them so fast right away that they never really make it into any of the builds downstream?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the quicker cycles afforded allow you to, deal with things as they happen more while they're in mind, and that's part of it as well. Just having close contact between code change and code test, code problem, code fix, code test, right? So you can validate very quickly with automation. Whereas if it's a manual cycle, then there's a disconnect, a cognitive disconnect between whoever is reporting the problems and those that are fixing it, and then having to retest.
And the result of that is higher bug volume.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. So automation delivers a lot of benefits. I think everybody understands that. Automation, in principle, automation employed throughout the process gets more bugs found faster, removes the bottlenecks by making the handoffs across the value stream more efficient, reducing speed. I'm starting to get the picture, but I'm still a little confused. And then I get to this and it says, well, let's talk about continuous testing. And my first reaction to this is, wow, this looks complicated. So help me simplify this in my head, Mark.
So indeed, this kind of answers the question, why doesn't everybody simply just automate tests and get the great benefits we've been talking about for continuous testing? Continuous testing is more than just automating tests. That's one of the pillars of continuous testing, but there are 8 pillars. So all of these things you have to consider. You're not going to get it all right all at once, but if you start with an inadequate solution, which too many people do, like I say, they'll focus on one particular tool, use that tool's capability to automate. But then later on, they'll find out that a lot of that time is wasted because you later on want to figure out how to expand the solution to other types of tests and other parts of the value stream, so you can do things like move tests back and forth, shifting left cases where it makes sense. It's really critical to start with a platform that has the capabilities that will really not only kick you off in the direction of continuous testing from the beginning, but also has the inherent breadth and depth of features to build a sustainable continuous testing, structure. And again, I see too many organizations, they run ahead with automated testing in a limited environment without thinking of where they're ultimately trying to get to. And then as they go, they have to back up or even cancel what they did. But if you start with a powerful platform, you can continuously build and optimize, continuous testing solution towards faster verdict assessments, which is the whole point of well-engineered test strategies. It's all about those verdicts. How do you find out what's working, what's not working quickly?
Yeah, so this is interesting because if you see that part of the pipeline in the middle is kind of the flow of a value stream or an abstraction of multiple value streams that are taking, epics and stories from the planning stage and moving them through allocating resources and delivering them through a DevOps CI/CD continuous delivery, system, and then out into production. So you have this almost this entity, which is a value stream. And we've been talking about value streams here for a few years now. And then you see, I'm looking at it and I see, okay, it's interesting because I've got APIs sitting on the top of this. I use the term loosely. I'm a marketing guy, so I do that sometimes. And I just think of this platform as having APIs where I'm connecting the tests. And ultimately, the platform's done right. I mean, based on the way this is, it looks like what you're trying to tell me is I can move these tests around, build them on top of these APIs of sort, and be able to therefore get my testing occurring at the right time quickly.
Yeah, you need to be able to, as you get faster and faster cycles, you need to be able to, dynamically shift test artifacts and test cases and test schedules, according to what's actually changing in the value stream. And that is a dynamic thing, right? What a change today may be a simple one. A change tomorrow may be a more complex or risky one. And you want to be able to shuffle things around really quickly to make sure that you get the best possible test before you deliver to minimize risk. So unless you have a platform that has that breadth of scope that can cover the whole value stream, you won't be able to do that.
Right on. Okay, so I'm starting to get a clue here. Starting to say, okay, we got to get a platform first. So we've been talking about value streams. So let's draw that connection between the value stream platform and how it plays into this. So let's start that discussion.
Yeah. So priority one, if you are trying to build up continuous testing, is pick a platform. Make sure it's something that can work with every phase of the value stream from the beginning, even if you're only focusing on one of the stages or steps in the value stream. Make sure you at least have a platform that has that capacity so you can move forward rather than two steps forward and one step forward and two steps backwards all the time. So it should be able to support development, integration phase, acceptance, pre-production. Each of these do have special requirements, but they also share, common requirements. And the tool needs to be able to orchestrate and automate test resources and facilitate sharing of test cases and easily integrate test tools that will come and go as the product matures and depending on what's important for a particular transversal of the value stream. You'll never get to a mature solution that's efficient unless you have that, that platform view as a kind of an overall controller. And if you do put it in place, then you're going to get things off the ground quickly, but at the same time, it would expand. I've seen too many organizations have to backtrack on their automated testing because they didn't take that as the first step.
Well, one of the very important elements of picking a platform is one of the things, regardless of what you pick and how you go about it, one of the things that we see, people looking to is to connect their tool chains. So I need to be able to connect it, and that's implied in that gray, section of the slide above. Is that I've got all my tools that are involved, the people that are involved with those tools, all kind of connected. That creates this data model, which is a common data model across the whole thing. I think is a key that is a key characteristic of the platform, which lends itself, therefore, to being able to support those test integrations at any point, and the data that's coming in to be able to be correlated across the entire stream. So if I'm testing, earlier, like a development test, I understand my Jira ID, for example, that'll have a mapping all the way through to the release that it gets delivered on. So that kind of capability to be able to take early test results and maintain them so I can have a full a full traceability of how I did my tests, where the information was. I think that is what's so exciting to me, is connecting, what we've been doing in value stream and saying, this really does lend itself to speeding things up simply by um, connecting these tests across from the beginning and the end of the pipeline. So that's pretty cool. Is that something that your customers that you talk to, Mark, as you do your consulting, is this something that is getting some traction, or how would you consider the awareness of this as a clue or as a key path to solving this speed quality dynamic that we've been talking about?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, the elites in the industry generally have figured that out. They're not my clients typically; they don't need help. But the ones that are kind of in the middle or at the beginning, definitely, they often start on the wrong path, and I find myself advising them, no. You first back up, get a platform in place, and or put a platform in place if it's a newer part of their organization, before you start just building up a bunch of test cases that ultimately may not fit and may not serve as you go. So it doesn't slow it down. It actually speeds up the process of getting to a continuous testing solution, but it may not be intuitive. Too many people just want to jump in and start building test cases with one of their tools.
Well, that's right. And that actually, kind of brings up the question of we've been talking about testing, test automation, doing the right tests and so forth. And we've had on these slides this reference to an environment. What test environments themselves, is that something people think of and do? It's like, de rigueur in your findings, or are people doing a lot of tests and then figuring out that their environments are unstable where they're doing the tests, or they're having complexities with getting environments set up in the first place? We see a little of that. How do you see it from your practical experience and your customers, Mark?
Well, I often see, if you ask an individual, do you have a problem setting up test environments? And they're thinking about it from their particular environment that they're working in. So if they're in dev, not much of a problem setting up a test environment, but if I have to do a larger test, maybe I have to wait some time to get the test environment for that. If maybe it's involving more complex topology of databases and different things. If you're in QA, they typically have some budget for environments. They may tell you they don't have such a big problem, but they're not thinking about the other stages. Similarly with acceptance testing or even pre-production testing, they're often different people, and individually they don't see it as such a big problem. But when you take it as a whole, and you think about how you really want to be able to share test cases and test methodologies as you accelerate, then it's a very, very serious issue that you really want to take care of, again, at the beginning, when you have the opportunity to start building tests and test suites and test solutions to allow that flexibility later as you grow. And if you start from the beginning, it doesn't slow you down. It actually accelerates the implementation of the solution. So orchestrating test environments for every stage in a consistent way is really important, so that how the developments are doing it, QA is doing it, people even in operations, if you can agree on a consistent approach, and that's what the platform provides you, you're going to get a lot further, a lot faster.
Yeah, we have one of our audience members here has made a comment that continuous testing is part of CI/CD. It is used as a gateway to decide if you advance the pipeline or not. That's how they're using it, which sounds like a solid way to use it from a CI/CD point of view. Any comment on that utilization?
Yeah, CI/CD is at the heart of the DevOps, part of the pipeline, but not everybody agrees on what the boundaries are. Typically, what's happening in development prior to a commit request is outside the boundary of CI, for example, but that still requires testing. And if you want to leverage what the developers are doing in order to optimize things, and CI/CD kind of ends at deployment, and there's a lot of testing that has to happen in production and by production people as well. So again, you want to have a consistent way of setting up these environments so that you can share testware, if you like. And as you accelerate, that becomes more and more important.
And we've chatted before on that topic. Specifically, what I'm referring to is the role of an SRE organization as a key component of the product team. And I think that starts to be a point of intersection as to how they would test and make sure things are working in production. That's a topic for another day, and we do have some resources on the Plutora side as well as DevOps.com of older webinars that we've done on SREs and their involvement in this, which I think is a natural extension of the topic. But you know, I find we have a test at Plutora. We have a test environment management capability. And it's been fascinating to see, you know, how people utilize that in the context of what you're talking about. So let's hear from you, Mark. Let's just give us a little bit more color on test environments, because I think ultimately test environments, with apologies to, more technical purist, I find the test environment almost to be the API into the value stream for testing. And one of my first epiphanies 5-6 years ago was test environments live, as the previous slide showed, they live up and down the value stream, not just in one spot, like maybe, the old days. So talk to me a little bit about the state of test environment management from your perspective. It's a key element of making this work, I think.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I would also point out, though, too often test tool vendors and test tools try to incorporate their own version of automation, orchestration, and test environment management. And unfortunately, that compromises the bigger picture. And that's not intuitive a lot of the times. Really, you want to have a separation of concerns. A good system design will separate the controlled from the controller, in effect. So the test management environment is essentially part of the controller. It shouldn't be what you're building inside an individual, tool. And that is very confusing, because many test vendors will talk to you about how their individual tool can support these features. But in reality, the road to effective, continuous testing is you do want to have a supervisor level or a layer where the test environment management is, orchestrating the big picture that's end to end across the value stream. So scheduling, orchestration of test resources, monitoring and analyzing results, and the utilization of test resources. So those are some of the big picture things that the test environment management provides and should provide. And that way you're going to get a more organized solution that you can build on, resolving test resource conflicts, making sure that you're keeping track of the efficiency of the use of tools, having testing tools and other test resources kind of as a pooled managed resource rather than dedicated is a way to getting a lot of efficiency and scaling.
Yeah, I think we've seen some of the organizations we work with that are more advanced along these lines. We've seen organizations that are set up. One of our customers, for example, his title is global director of non-production environments. With that kind of focus and effort and energy, they've really started to crack the code on getting this implemented. So I think this is a key component. So if we've established the platform, we've where we are so far as we come to the home stretch of the webinar, we've looked at the role of testing, continuous testing, benefits of automation, going down that path more so than adding people. That sounds like a good plan. Let's get a platform. That might be a good way to go. Environment management is something I should consider. Once I've started going down that path, it's about the testing. And so, it's all about the verdicts. So got a few minutes here to just kind of really dive into some of the attributes of continuous testing itself a little bit more specifically, Mark. So let's continue here.
Yeah, so testing is all about verdicts. Otherwise, why are you doing it, right? You want to know whether something's passing or failing in the circumstances that matter. And so once you have the environment set up and you have a platform that can orchestrate the whole picture, for the different types of topology you'll need, no matter what stage you're in, then it's a matter of, okay, building test cases that can get the verdicts efficiently, and then being able to take those verdicts through a common data model and, get results quickly, get the right results to the right people, sort out the false negatives and false positives from the reality, and that requires analysis. Yeah. So the platform needs to support that capability. If you look at the, again, from the point of view of optimizing, you want to be able to have some key metrics to analyze the tests and the verdicts through some uniform strategy. So building sustainable tests, need to start and provide data through that common data model, so that you can then figure out where the things are getting out of balance, no matter what stage of testing you're in. For example, you need capabilities to aggregate, analyze, and make visible the results from multiple different tools.
Okay. We've heard this shift left for a while. I've been hearing this. This is it feels like something we've been talking about for a while, but as we've discussed today, it's not something that's universally implemented. So talk us to us, help understand what's the bottleneck in making this happen. Why aren't more people doing it?
Yeah, so everybody talks about shifting left, and in an absolute sense, it's kind of nonsense. You can't shift everything to the very left. What you're trying to do is shift left tests that make sense to shift left. You couldn't, for example, do a production deployment validation before you've at least tested the code, see if it functions at all. So it's a strategic decision. At what point in the value stream do you do which kinds of tests? And that is a dynamic decision depending on what's going on, with what the application changes are that are going through the pipeline. So your platform needs to have that ability to be, support the ability to shift left in an intelligent way, right? So that you don't get that friction across the value stream, but at the same time you get good, coverage is sufficient to satisfy whatever your quality coverage, policies are.
Okay. All right. And here you go. Start to give some of the mantras of testing. Fail early. I've heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, there's shifting left is one of the tenets or principles, but fail early is the idea that you want to accelerate testing. Accelerating is not enough by itself. Simply running the test as early as possible in the value stream. It's also important to find the particular failures early. You really care mostly about the failures, so you want to arrange things so that any failure verdicts are judged as early as possible in each test case, as well as in a test suite and the test schedule. So you want to arrange that, and that the arrangement may vary depending on what's going on in the particular change. So again, you're speaking at a need to have kind of an overall supervisory level view, if you like, of testing, and then be able to address that in a fairly dynamic manner to make sure that you keep up with the requirements for that particular change and deliver as quickly as possible.
Okay. And so failing early and failing often.
Yeah. So that's the third tenet, right? Failing often simply means that you want a platform that can orchestrate different combinations of software stacks and test topologies, data variations, and so on. So you want to be able to run those tests again in these different variations quickly and find out where there are combinations that are failing. This is really all that is, but there's different combinations.
I would imagine that this is a dynamic discussion that varies pipeline to pipeline, product to product.
Yeah, I mean, there are different products and services are going to have different levels of variation, operating systems, browsers, types of users, topologies. Maybe some of them have different constraints of what they can deploy, and some features can or can't go. So you have very many variations, and you want to be able to orchestrate those variations. So a static set of tests is not sufficient as you get more and more mature and speeding up the value stream.
Right, and the delivery of value to the end user may involve a combination of releases that are dependent upon each other, that are showing different characteristics. So even within one product, if you will, I might have different aspects that are being tested very differently, because an operating system is going to be tested an enhancement to an OS is going to be tested differently than a mobile app. But they would, right. I mean, that's where the complication is. And it strikes me that that's another benefit of the platform, giving you not only insight across your pipeline, but an awareness of other pipelines, what else is going on in the system, the portfolio, if you will.
Yes.
And those dependencies within that common data model of the platform inform the testing of how well it's doing and where things might need to be improved, or whatever the case may be. I think that's a key element. It strikes me as I listen to you that we need to be sure to have in a continuous testing scenario. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. The platform needs to be able to support what I'd say a set of pipelines, federated set of pipelines, because often services and products are, especially in these days of microservices and that, you have to keep an eye on assumptions between services and make sure that you validate the combinations that are important, even though, microservices are apparently supposed to be, independent of each other. We all know that that's the ideal, but you need to verify it and test it whenever there's potential concerns. And therefore you need orchestration at a level above an individual value stream. You need to have a federated set of, have knowledge of it when to kick off different value stream platforms according to what's really going on and the risks.
Right. And one of the things, some of these are in the cloud and some of them are going to be on premises, and I've heard folks say, well, these on premises environments are going to go away. Everything's going to be in the cloud and it's going to simplify things. Does it really simplify things? Just because I can spin something up in the cloud, is that really the answer, or is it just a different method of doing the same thing?
Well, the use of cloud is convenient from the point of view of providing ephemeral, elastic infrastructures, which is really important in the continuous testing, because for efficiency at least, you're not going to have dedicated resources for everybody. But other than that, it's from a testing point of view, generally shouldn't matter whether you're running in the cloud or not, other than this efficiency element. There can be some performance issues. Certain elements that are running at real time may need some dedicated resources to supplement it. So the hybrid, multi-cloud as well, all of that needs to be something that the platform can deal with.
Yeah, that's what the folks that we talk to, they're not the unicorn software startups that had the luxury of designing their methodologies from scratch as they designed their product focus. We're talking about companies that have been in business for, in some cases, literally hundreds of years. And they've got, some parts of their organizations are incredibly advanced and the developers are really awesome. And they're using all the latest stuff, but within the fabric of their organization, the portfolio of all the dependencies associated with how they're delivering value, the integrations across, or not the dependencies across those type of advanced development scenarios and, more legacy oriented, dare I say, waterfall oriented kind of scenarios, they still exist. And I've got to be able to time that. And that orchestration capability starts to get thorny. So I think that the platform with the testing is not only starts to take you down the path of continuous testing, but it starts to give you better visibility into what those dependencies might, what problems they might cause and what opportunities they might present to get better, I think is an interesting way to look at it. So the need for environment management and test environments and continuous testing isn't going away simply because of the cloud.
There's actually a bit of a trend on cloud repatriation, I think they call it, where folks that have migrated to the cloud are then finding out it's more costly than they expected, and they're trying to move back. And that's really because they haven't got control over their expenses very well, and they're not working at a fine enough level of granularity for managing the resources, which becomes critical as you get more and more mature with your pipelines and speeding things up. Cloud is still cost effective, as provided you have the the visibility and the mechanisms for orchestrating things quickly rather than just holding on to resources a lot when you don't really need them. So being more efficient is a key.
Yeah, and I've seen, fail fast, fail early, fail often. I've seen those, and when I was looking at, and as we were discussing, be relevant. That one kind of stopped me. What do you mean by be relevant, Mark?
Well, don't just run all the same tests all the time and report at the same people. It's again, report what's relevant to the right people at the right time. Otherwise, again, it's a waste. I've seen too often where people have static test suites. They always run them no matter what change is going through the pipeline, and they always send the results to the same people no matter what the results were. And as you accelerate, again, you want to be more efficient. So get the right information to the right people at the right time, and don't bother everybody else. That's kind of the point.
It's funny.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to pause here for a survey, and in light of our conversation and your individual knowledge of your areas, where our audience is typically pretty well versed in some of these topics, what is the most important tool or information you need to provide to your management to persuade investment in continuous testing? If you're being asked to prioritize speed and you want to say, look, we need to incorporate more testing so that we can get faster, counterintuitive, but if I want to go in and start to get to that fourth, answer in the previous survey where I've figured it out, optimized, and we're doing continuous testing well within our pipeline. Where are you with needing to convince management? Do you need assessment data? Are you looking for ROI calculators to say, if I incorporate this and do these things, my return on investment is so and so? You want to talk to more folks that have done it before, customers of Marc's, case studies from vendors, analyst firms, what have you, or maybe competitive. Do you look at competitive guides? How do you do this? That's the key. Me interested. Marc, what do you think?
Well, as a consultant, I'm probably biased towards assessment data, which I think is important. It's going to give you what's going on with that particular organization or that particular set of value streams. Then some of the other things become important after that. So ROI, there's right ways and wrong ways to do ROI for DevOps and continuous testing. Some of them work and some of them don't work well. So at least knowing how to do it properly is important, but it should be based on the data from that actual organization. Case studies and okay, yeah. I'm not surprised people say ROI, but make sure you got the customer's correct data first.
Well, I think that we're seeing that a lot now for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if we'd have done this, in a different economic backdrop, the ROI calculator might be a little less.
Mm-hmm.
People are more willing to to aspire to higher level. I look at a case study and I want to be like that company. That makes a lot of sense. I can see the value down the road. That's where I want to go. People still have that passion, but they're saying, look, I do want to get to nirvana, but I need to show value this month because we're pressed for time and money and people, resources are thinner. So the ROI calculator is a big one. We are seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, seeing it on your data is really important. Okay, so we can continue now, and we'll go kind of wrap up. So this this diagram that's here is a view of the Plutora platform, and it is a value stream management platform. There are a few spaces has grown up. Certainly love you to look at ours, but in general, the kind of platform that provides the ability to connect a tool chain on the bottom with that integration and common data model. I then have an orchestration layer that allows me to do the kinds of things we've been talking about, set up CI/CD workflows, look at dependencies across releases, look at dependencies across portfolio, that sort of thing. And then a decision-making layer, if you will, that provides the metrics and analytics and the oversight on things like compliance and governance, for example, to make sure that I can prove to a governing, oversight body like the SEC or something, depending on the business I'm in, that I followed all the right steps. And that platform is an example of the kind of thing that we've been talking about relative to having test environment capability, common data model, and so forth and so on. There's a lot of data and information on this, but one of the things that is very cool is that we do offer a free trial, and you can start to play around with the instance and see how this might work in your environment. There's lots that you can do and do it for free, and we would love it if you were to go in there, and Mark would love it to be able to say, okay, let's talk to you guys about how we might incorporate this platform with a continuous testing strategy and ultimately start to address that speed quality trade-off. And this is something that we're very passionate about as a vendor, and wanted to make sure you understood that we have this free trial. It's a new thing, and we're going to be continuing to enhance it. So once you're in it, your options are wide open as to how you might use it. We also have an ebook that is all about test environment management and how you might use it to facilitate your continuous testing or your testing in general. So that ebook is available as another resource. And of course, some folks have asked, we have the handouts of the slides. They're located on the handout tab in the tabs in the upper right of the screen you're looking at now. And I think that that brings us pretty close to the end. So if there's no more questions, Cody, we're just in time to be able to give away some Amazon gift cards.
Awesome. Sounds good. Mark, Bob, thank you both so much for being here. It's always a pleasure working with you. A quick reminder to our audience that our session today was recorded. So should you like to rewatch this program, you'll be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand, or you can find the recording living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. So onto those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards that were mentioned. Our winners are Kelly S., Ernie L., Pyle L., and Marlon W. So to our 4 winners, please keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. But if you don't happen to see that email, do check your spam folder. I'd like to thank Plutora for sponsoring today's program, and to our audience who's joined us for the last hour. Thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. And on top of that, we really appreciate your feedback. So as soon as we close out, there will be a survey that'll pop up on your screen. Tell us what you liked about our program today, or maybe what you'd like to see on a future program. But otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day. And Mark, Bob, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.